I spoke about how this book came to me and how it related to my experience, what I was dealing with as far as what was being revealed to me at the time and where I was at when this book came to my attention and what I saw in the book once I had it in my hands, and how this sign was a message to me relating to my sign that I had up. So it was not a hard jump to find out or to know that this book was giving me a message, that it was meant for me to see it. Just by that sign alone. Just by the same thing that's on the sign that I had placed in Orlando, Florida. Over at Checkers. So it's public for anyone to see. So when I saw that, the cover, I knew I had to see it. I knew I had to look into it because of the fact that it was telling me something that I had to see. I remember when the sign came down on March 12th, 1997, after being at from August 22nd, 1996. And as I said, they had kept signs up until they would put something up, and instead of even leaving a sign blank, billboard blank, they would leave up whatever the previous sign that was there. And so that was pretty much how this one stayed up. After I finished it, I just left it up, and they left it up, and it was the same day on March 12th, 1997, that the Street Orion came to me. That was 1997. My mother had been in the house in that subdivision for 7 years. And it wasn't until that day that I saw it, because of the fact that I always went in one direction, and it was a detour that caused me to run into Orion Court. And after the sign came down, they replaced it with another sign. And the sign had blue eyes, just blue eyes on the sign. And at that point, when I saw the blue eyes on that sign, I had a feeling that it was something for me to see too, that it was something where someone's watching. And that's the first thing I saw when that sign was replaced. This was replaced with that sign, was blue eyes. And I remember when I went to court in December, the same year, December 4th, 1997, that the Judge Sharp, had the same blue eyes that was on that sign, the same color that was on the sign that replaced this sign that was up. So that's one thing I always kept in my mind. And that's why when I was in court, and I told him, I said, I think you know me. And this is where they started to think that, who's this guy saying, the judge, to this judge, I think you know who I am. That's what I said. If you can go back to the court record, you'll see those are the words. Because I remember those blue eyes that came up on the sign after this. As it was said in the book, it talked about people who knew what's going on and basically keeping it to themselves. So now I'm going to go into NASA, considering that I'm going to show you some things here that's going to make it more obvious that it's not far-fetched that NASA had this also. Because one, as I said before, Nassau was started by Nazis. The United States brought over 1,000 Nazis who should have been on trial for Nuremberg for their part in the Nazis and the war itself, but they were brought here because Russia was taking some, even though Russia did defeat the Nazis. And they were brought here to work on projects, rocketry, and even over the CIA. So because when you watch movies like Hellboy, you see these Raiders of the Lost Ark, there's always some movie that has a theme that has a Nazi involvement as far as esoteric, some clandestine type of movie that involves somehow a Nazi comes up into it. And here, one of the things that would have gotten a person who knows the history of Nassau and the Nazi origin would have been this date right here. Anyone who would have had any type of historical understanding of that, anybody knows that the Nazis began here as far as taking over. That Third Reich started in January 30th, 1933. If anybody knows anything else, they know that. So this is where this would have at least grabbed the attention once they look at this, because if we're dealing with scientists, people want to know what's this, what is it symbolic, because we're dealing with esoteric. We're dealing with things that most people are not going to understand, and some people are trying to figure out, what is this saying here? How is this combination of this here, this and this and this, and what's going on here? And then when you know that people are dealing with messages, and then knowing that the book itself is telling you that the people that know already here, this would include Nassau. If you're dealing with something that's of origin from outer space, someone from here, this is going to be Nassau. So I'm going to show you something here that's going to put it together. Here on 183, where it says Tom himself allegedly the god Atom, and it's saying how the emphasis on the Great Pyramid, and refused to repeatedly be drawn on its purpose, saying it only that this will be revealed when the landing has happened. The landing, the entrance is from the Sphinx, and that the Sphinx himself is Atom, which I said sunrise, high noon, sunset. And then being that the Sphinx is connected here is when I said that when I was inside of the second pyramid, because I said it reminded me of the house inside 5312, and that's why when I backed up to the wall. And here is where I said I was on the outside looking at the way that it looked like a cul-de-sac, but it was reversed because that's where the Hermiket, the Sphinx, was facing. So it was like looking outside of the driveway into the street on 5312 on Snowflake Court. So I looked at that, and this is why I'm looking that way. So back to back, representing the same that's on the Sphinx itself, the Hermiket, the dream stella, the dream that brought me there. So here is connecting that in itself. Before I go into that, I'm going to talk about this right here. This book was given to me when I was in the low from someone who was in a medium who transferred over after I transferred over, and brought the book with me once he knew he was coming over, because he said I had to see this because I had told him to. And he gave me the book because he said he thought about me when he had this book and read it, because he knew what I was telling him. And this book here was handed to me while I was at the low. And it says Pyramids of Montauk, and why it became so significant as a pinpointing reference and a connection, which got Montauk is in Long Island. And that this book was talking about Long Island and how they had the Native Americans, the Montauk, and that the Montauk was dealing with the Montu, and how it was connected to Egypt, and how they said that the names of the chiefs, that it's similar to Pharaoh when George Washington and them met them, and that this is dealing with the time travel. And this goes back to when they say the Nazis itself were at the end of Long Island and had reached the side of Long Island and were doing tests. And then this goes into time travel, where you're dealing with the Philadelphia experiment. This is Long Island, where I'm born and raised. And I'll tell you about the beings that came to the house, or came to my room, that they were experimenting on other worldly things, like when you see the movie Strange Things, and how these experiments were taking place on Long Island, as I'm telling you what I was dealing with as a child, and then go from here to what was going on in Orlando. So here it is, a book that was talking about what I was telling people about, that I knew that I was growing up and experiencing at the time, dealing with time travel and dealing with the beings that would come through walls and appear. And here it is that they were experimenting on these things, and said that something came through. And as a matter of fact, when I came home, I looked up this Preston Nichols, and I called him, and I talked to him. And when I told him about what I said, everything was going on, he invited me. He said if I ever get a chance to come up to where he's at in New York, that he had some stuff, because he said he had the same thing from what I was telling him. He knew I was telling him the truth. He knew I wasn't just shooting nothing at him and making it up. As I said, this book came to me just as the other book, Stargate Conspiracy, came to me, where this book was handed to me while I was at the low. And here, showing you that it's speaking of Montauk, which is Long Island. And here it says Montu. Montu is also one of the attractions at Busch Gardens. So here it is, talking about World War II. What are we dealing with? We're dealing with the Nazis. We're dealing with the experiment. We're dealing with projects, because of the fact that this is what's going on. The psychic abilities of various individuals. This is what has been said and what I've been showing throughout. And being that I personally spoke with him, I didn't speak with him to try to get any type of second hand or to agree. I already knew what I was dealing with. I already know what's going on. But as speaking with him, he was very interested, and he said if I ever come up that way, to look him up. So, but I didn't go up. I haven't been up there until 2014, and this was like 2010. Actually, before I wrote Universal Studios, I spoke with him. And you can see here, it's speaking about Pyramids of Montauk. And it's showing you here the connection to Egypt and as a gateway between dimensions. And what have I been saying? This is not something that someone's making up, that I'm making up. It's just telling you here, this is what's been going on. And I know it personally. So now I'm going to get into Nassau. Because like I said, people know. I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. So you can already have a heads up of what's going on here. And the fact that before I go into Nassau, this is what I'm going to let you see. I'm going to go into Nassau with the OSIRISRex and how the OSIRISRex is connected to what I'm saying. And the fact that it's not just a space probe. As I said, Project Paperclip. People know. And just by taking this word itself that you're going to see and how they explain it and how they bring it out and how they put it together and then how everything goes and the symbolic suggestion of the project and mission. But I'm going to give you the heads up so you can be way ahead of everybody else who knows or looks at it as being just a NASA program, a mission. Here's the word Rex. So as they say, OSIRISRex, how they extended this in order to include it in the mission, in the probe, where it says Rex is king, a Latin word meaning king, used to show the side in a court case, is the state when there is a king. You see, this is what I've been saying. It's not about making anything up. It's about showing the proof and the truth.
OSIRISRex. Does it refer to an ancient god? Is it a space mission? Join the 321 Science team as we explore just what OSIRISRex is. OSIRISRex. It's almost all capitals, so it's a good guess to recognize it as an acronym. Scientists and engineers use acronyms to form a word that represents a longer phrase. We say them sometimes as letters or formed into a word. OSIRISRex is an acronym that is the name of a NASA mission.
You may have noticed by now, if not, that the word Osiris is the only word that's capitalized on the whole message. Meaning that, like I said, the connection here between this message and NASA, showing you the connection between the Third Reich, and here showing you the fact that this is the only word that's capitalized, and then how they go into explaining how the same way NASA is capitalized, the same way this is capitalized. And what I'm showing you is connecting this sign to NASA and the OSIRISRex, and why they had to add on Rex to this itself.
This mission will send a robotic spacecraft to an asteroid to return a sample to Earth for study. The OSIRISRex spacecraft will launch in 2016, rendezvous at the asteroid Bennu in 2018, sample it, and return the sample to Earth in 2023. The acronym is inspired by the myth of Osiris, and each letter in it tells a piece of the story of the mission. As a whole, the acronym explains why scientists want to go to Bennu,
Bennu bird. The name Bennu came from the word weeben in ancient Egyptian language, which means to rise or to shine. You might know the Beano bird from Harry Potter as the phoenix that burns itself to flames, that rises from its ashes. The Beano bird is an ancient Egyptian symbol associated with the gods Ra, Atum, and Osiris. The Beano bird symbolizes creation and rebirth. It was said to have created itself at the dawn of creation. It shared similarities with the Greek phoenix. It is not clear which one preceded the other, but some scholars believe that the Beano bird was the inspiration for the phoenix. Both creatures were birds that could resurrect periodically. Like the Beano bird, the phoenix took its power from the heat and fire of the sun, which allowed it to be reborn. According to Greek mythology, the phoenix died every 500 years and then was reborn from its own ashes. However, the Egyptian sources don't mention the Beano bird's death, likely because it was a deity. However, the idea prevailed that the Beano bird was reborn from its own.
And what they hope to learn about the history of the solar system and the early Earth by studying this asteroid. The mission is interested in characteristics of asteroids that can bring life or can end life. The O is for origins. The mission will return a sample of an asteroid essentially unchanged since the early solar system. It's like a time capsule which holds volatiles like water, organic molecules which are needed for life, and other elements which have been isolated for 4.5 billion years. This sample can reveal details about the origins of the solar system and about the building blocks of life on Earth. The SI is for spectral interpretation. Scientists characterize asteroids using telescopes and by studying meteorites, rocks that have fallen to Earth from space. They study how an object's light is reflected from an asteroid surface at different wavelengths and call this a spectrum. They also study how light is emitted from the surface as heat. Comparing asteroid with meteorite spectra allows scientists to interpret what an asteroid is made of, how hot it is, and how big the rocks on its surface are. But to hold a piece of an asteroid and know exactly where it came from will allow scientists to gauge how well they match what they see through telescopes to meteorites and make future matching even more precise. The RI is for resource identification. Asteroids could hold a lot of treasure. Mining asteroids for precious metals and other materials to bring back to Earth promises profit. But perhaps more important are the water and other resources that will allow humans to move out into space. If we really want to explore or even live beyond Earth, we'll need to find resources in space to do that. It's just too expensive to launch everything we'll need from Earth. Identifying what type of resources are available on Bennu will be an important step for future exploration. The S is for security. We know the Earth isn't always a secure place to live. The OSIRISRex mission will study the orbit of Bennu to learn more about its potential to strike the Earth in about 200 years. Understanding how the Yarkovsky effect alters the orbit of this asteroid will provide information that can improve our understanding of asteroid orbits in general and lead to better protection from asteroid impacts. REX is for Regolith Explorer. The word regolith is formed from two Greek words meaning blanket and rock. It's the layer of loose material over bedrock on a small planetary body like an asteroid. Exploring the regolith in detail will help us understand composition and processes that occur on asteroid surfaces. OSIRISRex will explore the regolith of Bennu at the site where we collect the sample. This will help us place the sample in context and make the sample more scientifically valuable. Over the next 3 years, the OSIRISRex team will ready the instruments and spacecraft. Just as Osiris was reformed from pieces scattered around Egypt, OSIRISRex will grow from components fabricated around the world into a spacecraft that will travel to Bennu to assemble the pieces of the asteroid's story. This small asteroid will help give us a big picture, combining the information about origins, spectra, resources, orbit, and regolith will provide the full story of this asteroid and clues to the stories of many others. This video is an OSIRISRex production. OSIRISRex is a partnership of the University of Arizona, NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and Lockheed Martin.
contain a clue to the mystery of the achievement of the previous 4th Dynasty pyramids. These pyramids are at Saqqara, 10 miles south of the Great Pyramid, near the ancient capital of Memphis. The builders of these now ruined pyramids undoubtedly knew the legends of their ancestors, including the ancient Egyptian worship of the stars, and their belief that the stars were manifestations of their gods.
Which were totally devoid of text. These crumbled 5th Dynasty pyramids are full of these fantastic writings.
Just look up at the ceiling. I mean, it's absolutely covered with stars. It's just like being out under the night sky.
They constitute the oldest body of religious writing in history. And they're there on the walls to help the dead king into his voyage into the afterworld.
These are pyramid texts and accompanied the mummy that would have been in this tomb, hopefully providing the required mystical hymns and prayers to help the royal owner's journey into the next world. The act of inscribing an idea did more than merely record it. It had magical significance. It was a spell, and had the power to ensure that the written sentiment would actually happen. This, for example, is a snake with its head cut off. This would ensure protection of the soul from snakebite. These texts also show this shape known as an ankh, which symbolized the life force, and their reverence for the great god Atum. And these writings talk repeatedly of the pharaoh becoming a star and traveling to the constellations.
This hieroglyph symbolizes Sobed, which is their name for Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, which they associated with the goddess Isis.
And here is the name of the king Unas in the oval-shaped cartouche. And here we are told he is given life and he is the beloved of the supreme god, his father, Atum. Now the pyramid text.
The Egyptians believed civilization began in their country so many thousands of years ago.
The creation myth of the ancient Egyptians is constantly repeated in pyramid texts on the walls of tombs and on funerary plaques. It was of prime importance to them, and they saw each successive pharaoh reenacting it.
In the beginning, Atum Ra, the great sun god, looked down on the newly formed land. He sent one of his grandsons, Osiris, to live among its people, to teach them goodness and civilization. Osiris, both man and god, walked the land of Egypt with his consort Isis, and it became a beautiful place. Alas, Osiris's brother Seth was jealous of him and murdered him. He cut his body up into 14 parts and scattered them around Egypt. Isis, overwhelmed with sorrow, roamed the land in search of Osiris. Eventually, finding all the parts, she bound them up with muslin strips and brought his body back to life, just long enough to place herself on his phallus and take his seed. Osiris then ascended from the land of Egypt, leaving Isis hiding in the bulrushes of the Nile Delta. She bore a son, Horus, who grew up to avenge his father's death. Isis, her earthly mission fulfilled, joined Osiris in the stars.
The stars then in this night sky were seen by the ancient Egyptians as a heavenly counterpart to their own land, inhabited by gods and the souls of the departed. The main feature they saw down here was the Nile, and when they looked up into the night sky,
as I said, the connection with Nassau, OSIRISRex, Benu, and Benu is connected to Atum. And you see here where it talked about the Great Pyramid, and but he has refused repeatedly to be drawn on its purpose, saying only that this will be revealed when the landing has happened. And it lets you know that this here was back in 2016. And the landing of the OSIRISRex has happened, but the landing already happened itself. Before that. Just as I showed this here in 2016, where I screenshotted it before it all happened. Here, showing Area 51, 2016. The layout itself, it was already here. Showing you the Area 51, where you see now the Epic Universe itself, next to Lockheed Martin, which is mentioned on the NASA program dealing with the OSIRISRex. Showing you now, this is where Grand Helios, which would Atum, wherever it be the Greek story, the Roman, and who's the emperor that brought and made Helios famous at the time. Julian, which is my son's name. His name is Julian Amon. And he was born April 30th, 1997, during the time when all this was going on. His mother, Myra Roman, named him Julian. And when I asked her why did she name him Julian, she said it just came to her to name him Julian. I didn't influence her to say Julian. She just told me she named him Julian when I went to the hospital, and she had already given him the name. She said the name had come to her. And her last name is Roman. Remember on the sign where it said, "I'm Osiris on your dollar." And it said Orlando itself is the dollar bill. Here, you see. In the book, it talked about the landing. That's when it'll be revealed. And here is the landing. This is the landing itself. Here. Speaking of OSIRISRex, here. It's all here. June 1997. I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I stopped at a place that said Soul Food, which I thought it was a place to get something to eat. But when I walked in, it was a bookstore, and the first thing that caught my eye was the cover of this book that said 5/5/2000, which it talked about the ultimate disaster, showing the Great Pyramid here in snow. So of course I went for it. So when I got the book, I looked it over, and I saw that the book was speaking about a pole shift, that the pending pole shift, which I know that my sign had up, had the pole shifts, had the earth in the opposite direction, which would have been enough to catch anybody's attention who has any information about this topic. The first thing I read was this, talking about the sudden change to take place. So it's not something that when someone saw my sign on the trail with the earth in the opposite direction, anyone familiar with that subject of the book who would have saw this sign posted, seeing the same thing here, with a pole shifts showing this in the opposite direction, knowing that the subject itself has been studied and talked about among circles, that most people would not have any clue of what's going on. But to have this posted publicly and to see it would have drew some attention to this, especially showing here, and who would be interested in something like this. As you can see, the topic itself has been around for a while, because this book here goes back to the 1980s, but it was in June 1997 that it came to my attention. Actually 1982, the same year that I came to Orlando. The book goes into how the earth itself goes into different shifts through times, many times, thousands of years. Sudden movements of the earth change to the point where everything is switched around. And at this point, seeing a sign that's on the trail, it's out publicly, and then knowing this here would have probably gave some people some curiosity as far as to wonder why that sign was showing that message. Here it shows a pole shift, and it shows you here how they reported based on this information would have been important because it dealt with climate change and how civilizations may not have been defeated through war, but many civilizations that have been extinct through climate, which goes to a pole shift, which came from me just putting up the sign and switching the poles here, showing it the opposite direction. But there are people who are on this subject, which would include people in NASA. Here also, in this book, it speaks about the obelisk and how the obelisk itself was brought to New York from Heliopolis in February 1880. And this obelisk was set up. And it talks about the people that came from the temple of Ammon in Heliopolis. Amen. And how it was placed in the position it was where they found it in Egypt. And that for me to say my connection to it, here it is, Tutmosis III, and the fact that here, Anglo-Saxon Lodge 137, shipment to New York. So this lets you see that this was a European endeavor. For me to have any connection to this and saying that these obelisks, I am directly connected to them. And then to say I was living on 684 Commander Avenue and I can connect myself to both of these obelisks today. From Central Park and the one in London. But that's not the idea of why these were brought here. There was enough in common with the book and the sign that was taken down in March to know that this was not something that people just went by, and it went by unnoticed, especially if anybody was inquisitive and then had any idea of the pending or the idea of the pole shift, going back to the Mayan calendar, and then having this here showing you north and south. But it's the pyramid also, which is also mentioned in the book as being relative and very important part of this pole shift itself. So maybe once they found out who put it up, the interest may not have been there anymore, or could have been there, but keeping it to themselves, as it's said in the book.
Of why they were so motivated, it's necessary to look at the whole area. Egypt is normally seen like this, with north at the top. The ancient Egyptians, however, made their maps facing south. Their whole world view faced south, and the stars that reached the height of their arch through the sky due south was their directional benchmark. The fertile delta known as Lower Egypt, where the Nile flows into the Mediterranean, is thus at the bottom, and the long, narrow Middle Nile, known as Upper Egypt, is at the top. The three great pyramids at Giza, built by the pharaohs Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura, are therefore here, and we're going to examine the first and largest of them, Khufu's Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid has four major internal features: an underground chamber that could possibly predate the pyramid, the Queen's Chamber on the exact center line, thought until recently to have been abandoned, and a spectacular grand gallery that leads up to the King's Chamber. The vast grand gallery with its converging stepped walls is considered a triumph of the mason's art. This is the entrance to the King's Chamber. The roof as well as the walls are made from Aswan granite, which gave a hard and holy ring to every sound. The only object in the chamber is the sarcophagus. This was the first sarcophagus to be used by a king, in this case, Khufu. It seems its lid has long since been smashed up and his bejeweled body stolen. The only other feature is the entrance to two tiny 8-inch square shafts that are meticulously crafted and travel at precisely maintained angles throughout the masonry of the pyramid. Boval and Gilbert maintain that probing the secrets of these shafts is central to understanding the function of the pyramid. Traveling out from both chambers are four small 8-inch square shafts, a north shaft from the King's Chamber and a southern shaft. These both extend through to the outer casing of the pyramid, a northern shaft from the Queen's Chamber, which does not reach to the outer casing, and was also closed at its inner end, and finally a southern shaft, again closed at both ends. This is the entrance to the southern shaft of the Queen's chamber. Originally, it didn't come right through. It stopped a couple of inches back, suggesting its function was ritualistic rather than practical.
You have what I call a...
Jean Carizel is a leading French construction engineer and geological consultant. As he was taking part in the building of the Cairo Metro, he encountered the pyramids. Today, he's president of the France-Egypt Society.
You will see that Khufu put magical devices in his pyramid. For instance, there are many recesses. You don't know why. The shaft, of course, the Khufu pyramid is unique for shaft. You have 4 shafts. I think that they have a very significant function. And the construction of that shaft was not easy at all for many reasons. You have a wall, perfectly well dressed with stones, and the last one are hewn slantwise, as we see with the appropriate slope. Then in the upper stone is hewn exactly the section of the shaft. If the Egyptians have accepted these complications, this is a proof of the very significant function of
Yeah, Banu, sitting under the shade tree here, going back to the OSIRISRex in Banu, right here, June 24th, 2017. No other Banu bird or bird. That's a prop. Here, sitting in the position of the pineal gland itself, the mind. Going back to the moral itself with the lion's head, the Osiris coming out. The name, OSIRISRex. Another thing you see here, Banu, and you see that the tomb itself that was found between the Hermiket, the Sphinx, and the second pyramid had 3 levels down, which is the 3 levels here into the tomb of Osiris. As I stand here telling you about the OSIRISRex in Banu, in Nassau, next to John Young Parkway, in the brain, which John Young was nicknamed was Brains. John Young landed the Orion. The Orion has landed back in 1972, April 1972. The Orion has landed. The Sirius coming out of the mouth, Osiris, the lion. The lion downtown Orlando, city Orlando, representing the lion on the foot of my sandal, stepping into Giza. The same, the OSIRISRex, here in the pineal gland. The position itself. Was here inside the brain, the pineal gland, where you see Banu, right in here. since put some construction in, but the brain is still here. Front, neck, here. Park Central. Grand Central Parkway, here. Center is the house. And how you know it's Stargate is the fact that this street here it's called Eastgate. It's Eastgate. Here. In Eastgate, here, you see it aligned from here. You see it's called Eastgate at the mall. From the mall here, Oak Ridge. Here. Eastgate is Kingsgate here. So you see how the mall has Eastgate and Eastgate here is lined up with Kingsgate. And the reason why it's separated is because of here. But usually do have streets that are the same. And you can see that Eastgate is aligned with Kingsgate. Stargate. Showing you here. It's Kingsgate. Ridge. Showing you was Kingsgate. I decided to blur out Kingsgate itself here. But this is Kingsgate, as it says. So you see that Kingsgate is aligned with Eastgate at the mall. The experience back on August 11th, 1995, when the thought came to me about the pyramid and the world being in the other direction. And all I had was a thought all that time. Made a map based on the map I received from the travel agency course that I took. We were going over airport itineraries. And from that point, all I had was that map. Was going to take it to the Million Man March, but I did not. And after that, it was in 1996 in July that the word 1555 came to me, and I knew that this map that I've been holding for the last year had to go on 441. Like I said, all this was a thought. But after I put the billboard up, the houses, like I said, were laid out like Orion across Orlando was shown. And then from that point on, the idea that Orlando itself was the dollar bill, which came in November. And again, all these were thoughts. Then I saw the billboard, gold-faced billboards that created the triangle around one of the houses, which I saw on the program that made the triangle into the Great Pyramid, and the Great Pyramid showing Orlando as a dollar, with the airport itself being at was McCoy Air Force Base as the Great Seal. Again, all this was a thought. Where do your thoughts come from? The thoughts come from your mind. And where am I at right now? I'm in the mind. Did you see that water fountain? As I spoke about the Millennium Mall, showed you the obelisk and the reflection pond, showing you that it was all connected. The mall at Millennia. Now you're looking at a fountain here itself, not far from there, on John Young. And I said John Young itself was John Young, the astronaut, first astronaut to fly in the space shuttle, 1981. Connecting the layout itself back to Kennedy Space Center, John F. Kennedy, which I said the Millennium Boulevard goes from Oak Ridge to John Young Parkway, which is JFK or Kennedy Space Center, Nassau, and I mentioned the Orion all together, saying that this is connected. And again, these were thoughts that were transmitted from one to another. And the idea of a thought in the mind. Now, if you take a look where you're at right now, where I'm at, once you pull back and we take a aerial view of where I'm standing now, which you will see I'm in the mind. How could it be? How could it be that I'm showing this at the same time I'm showing the Millennium Mall, showing you the Spirit, the Millennium Area, the obelisk, connecting them to the Million Man March, Washington, D.C., talking about houses like Orion, showing you the houses like Orion, connecting this whole layout back to that point, meaning a spirit moving back and forth is not bound by time, just like the whole layout of the billboard being on checkers. In a game of checkers, you move across the board, go to the other side, get a double crown, and then you're able to fly around the board. This is just what I'm doing, collecting parts, pieces, all this connecting together. I got all these things, all these pieces that I've been pulling off the board, like a game of checkers, which used to be played during the Pyramid Age itself. This is all real. You may not understand or see the communicating connection, but this is an unbroken chain going all the way back to my childhood with those two beams that used to show up in my room. And they left a mark that I removed from my body at the age of 13. How could I say all that and show all this and be making it up? Take a good look at what I'm showing you. It means the billboard itself, as I mentioned, was basically magic. And everything that happened after the fact, showing the world in the opposite of all, meaning the world itself, the foreclosure of the world, going back to living on 96th Street in Columbus, the New World. Well, this is the New World. The Millennium Mall, showing the layout like a sperm and an egg, new birth, a new cooptus, just like what's on the dollar bill itself, the birth. This is real. People talk about it, I'm showing it. These are all the buildings that I've been on. Kings Point, the Uraeus, the location. That's the last building in Crowns Point. The last building. And the dates. First building. Here it is, here. Uraeus. Backing up everything. Uraeus, here. All these places. All these markers. The buildings. Here. As you can see, here. all over here. So, it's all these buildings on the Uraeus, showing you what I'm saying. This is why now I can show you this. Because as a child, I was given the astronaut flight suit. But now, as an adult, I'm showing you this.